If ever there was a need for the waymaker, if ever there was a time when we needed the miracle worker, if ever there was a moment when we needed the promise keeper, if ever there was a situation where we needed light in the darkness, if ever we needed God, it's right now. It's right now today. So we decided to push pause on our normal series so that we could speak today from a faith perspective into what's happening around us. You've heard probably 100 or more people say something like, this is uncharted territory, or we've never been in a situation like this before. Just yesterday, I was texting with my dad, and I said, Dad, I've never seen anything like this. And Dad said, son, I've never seen anything like it either. Unless you've been on a month-long wilderness hunting excursion or shipwrecked on a deserted island, you know coronavirus is spreading, the stock market is falling, people are panicking, communities are closing, and in America, Republicans and Democrats are working together. That's the real indication something is terribly wrong. You know it's bad when that happens. I was in a meeting earlier this week with PCC's strategic leadership team. We call it the SLT. And at one point, I said out loud, this is like a bad dream. It feels like I'm in a movie. A week ago, I would watch Worldwide Meltdown through the fictional lens of a Hollywood creative for entertainment. I never thought they'd cast me in the film. What's happening? Some honest, sincere followers of Jesus are trying to find meaning in prophecy and teachings in the Bible about end times. And we're asking questions like, well, is Jesus coming back? I mean, is the world ending? Is this Revelation's apocalypse happening before our eyes? I'll tell you the truth. I have no idea. Where we are in the timeline of God's cosmic plan is way above my pay grade, and no disrespect to you, it's way above your pay grade too. So can I make a suggestion? Maybe obsessing on things that are completely beyond our control, things like the timing of the world's end, for instance, maybe that's misplaced focus. In fact, could I suggest to you that it's also misplaced opportunity? Because there are some things that are in our control. There are some things that God wants for us and God wants from us right now in the midst of all this mess. See, we're all trying to figure out who to listen to. I mean, who has reliable information? Is it Facebook? Is it the news? If so, which news? Is it the government? If so, which government? I don't know about you, but I'm having a hard time sorting through the volumes of communication that I am getting. I got coronavirus updates this week from Walmart, Airbnb, Target, every airline, OfficeMax, eBay, UPS, Disney, Amazon, Netflix, Expedia, and at least 100 organizations I have never interacted with in my life. Who can you trust? Who really knows? God does, actually. He knows, and he can be trusted. So when my structured, planned, calendared, financially responsible, mapped out life is thrown out the window along with the entire world as we just knew it, how are we supposed to respond? We're supposed to respond by returning to the only trusted source we've got. So let's ground ourselves on the Bible's truths and the timeless teachings that God gave to us, maybe especially for this moment right here. We're going to look at two things that we should do and two things that we should not do right now. This is not an exhaustive list. I'm sure there's more to say about it, but this will at least get us moving in the right direction. Plant our feet back on solid ground and allow us to take a deep breath so that we can move forward as people of faith. Here we go. Number one, we should take care of our neighbor. We should take care of our neighbor. I want you to think about the emotions that are running around our community right now. Think about all the speculation. You're asking some of these questions. I'm asking some of these questions. We all are. Am I going to get sick? Is it responsible for me to visit my mom and dad? Am I going to run out of food? Is my job going to exist when this is all over? Am I going to be able to pay the bills? What's the world going to look like a month or two from now? So at a time when normally we would come together because everyone desperately needs to come together for some comfort, we're actually having to pull apart and isolate and hole up. But just because we've suspended school, and just because we've suspended sports, and just because we've suspended physical church does not mean that we should suspend loving other people and serving them well. Jesus told his followers this. He said, "A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you're my disciple." Disciple means follower. By this, everyone will know that you're my follower if you will love one another. This text, like every text in the Bible, comes in a larger context. Jesus right here is about to be crucified, the Son of God about to be executed. And for his followers, the world as they knew it is about to end. These are some of Jesus' closing words to his closest followers in the moments that preceded their worst nightmare. And what does he tell them to do? Make sure you treat each other with love. Make sure you take care of each other, because you're all you've got. More than that, Jesus is saying the world is watching. By this, everyone will know that you're my follower. The world is watching. Treat each other in such a way that when people around you look at you, they'll say, whatever it is they got between them, I want some of that. I want to be one of them. One time Jesus was asked about the greatest commandment, and his response was 2 for the price of 1. The greatest commandment, Jesus said, is to love God with everything you've got. But a close second, close because Jesus said the second was like the first. The second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. One more, I just want to show you one more. Then we're going to see how this all practically applies to us. The Apostle Paul, a later follower of Jesus, wrote this. He said, everything we know about God's word can be summed up in a single sentence. Love others as you love yourself. That's an act of true freedom. You and I might be separated physically, but we are still commanded to love others, to love our neighbors, to love one another. Isolation is not a release from care. It is a call to it. Isolation is not a release from care. It is a call to care. For a long time, if you've been around our church, you've been hearing us use this phrase. We talk about the just ones at PCC. We titled it, we named it because we believe that there is at least one person, just one around you, that God put in your life on purpose. And you're supposed to be an influence because that person needs to know who Jesus is. So you're supposed to live a life that reflects well on Jesus. At some point, have a spiritual conversation with that person when the time is right. And at some point, you're supposed to invite your just one to church. What if right now, we take that idea, the just one idea, and we turn it just a little, and we think about how can we love just one neighbor? We are told to love our neighbors as ourselves, not just by anybody, but by Jesus himself. But this crisis, it's produced some bad neighboring. We've been loving ourselves. We've been taking care of ourselves. I can prove it. Anybody been to the grocery store this week and seen something like this? On Thursday afternoon, the panic was really starting to grow, and this whole toilet paper hoarding thing began. And I'm on my way home from work after a really long day, and I told Susan, we left together in different cars, and I said, look, I'm just going to pull in to the grocery store. So I get to the parking lot, which is packed like the day before Thanksgiving. I park a mile away, I go in, I grab a basket, and after I get my basket, I'm standing there. I haven't even moved into the grocery part of the grocery store, and I think to myself, I don't even know why I'm here. I don't know what we need. I don't know if we're out of anything. I don't have a list. I just came here because everybody else was doing it. And I thought, I know what, I'll get toilet paper. And I have no idea if we have any, But it's not like it's going to go bad, and it's not like you're not going to need it. So I travel down to that section of the store, and of course, there's none. There were some groceries there, and people there, although the place was packed, they were kind, but they were also, stocking up. Stocking up like they wouldn't be able to count on anybody around them to help them. So I ran around up and down the aisles, and I threw a few things in my cart. But then I just stopped. I stopped and I looked around and I thought, how did it come to this? I mean, seriously, how do people not recognize, how do they not know that there are followers of Jesus around them who will help them if they have a need? How do they not know that there are people who represent Jesus well around them who will share our scarce resources, who will love them like we love ourselves? And how did the followers of Jesus not recognize that in times of stress, getting all we can for ourselves is not the way of Jesus? How did it come to this? Maybe we earned our reputation as bad neighbors or like everyone else neighbors. But it's not too late. We can still get back our love your neighbor as yourself status. We can still get back our love your neighbor as yourself standing in our community. So let me ask you, what would it look like if in the coming days, all of us, every one of us, decided to love just one neighbor? This week, what if you reached out to just one neighbor, maybe an elderly person you know? What if you reached out to them and asked them if they need you to do anything, to maybe run an errand? Or what if there's a healthcare worker around you that you could call and ask, what can I do to help you so that you can help the people who are sick? Can I drop off a meal? Can I care for your kids? Can I do something for you at your home? Or what about somebody you know that you could call and say, hey, you got toilet paper? Because I got some to spare. How about someone living in a nursing home? Or someone who's sick in a hospital, or a friend in prison? All three of those situations are places where no outsiders are allowed in for the next few weeks. We don't know how long. So they're completely isolated, even more than you and me right now. What if you could call them, or send a card, or send a picture with a note? What if every person listening to me now reached out to just one neighbor this week and loved them like we love ourselves? Not only would you be fulfilling a command that Jesus, by the way, gave to us, but we would actually cause the rest of the world around us to maybe, just maybe, take another look at the Jesus we say we believe in, at the Jesus we say we follow, at the Jesus who said, love your neighbor like you love yourself. Secondly, we should not make permanent, irrevocable decisions. Not now. Not unless we absolutely have to. See, when people begin to panic, they almost always make bad decisions. You have a fight or flight instinct, a wiring that God put inside of you, and that fight or flight wiring is designed for basic survival in a moment of extreme peril. It was not given to you for long-term strategy planning. Two things Jesus said about this. Jesus, by the way, therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. And then in Luke, Jesus said, don't begin until you count the cost. Who would begin a construction of a building without first calculating the cost to see if there's enough money to finish it? So first, I want to deal with the Matthew 6 text and apply it to our time of crisis right now. The one that says, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will worry about itself. Today has enough trouble of its own. I think everybody would agree that today, right now, has enough trouble. And I want you to imagine this scenario. Imagine you were in a car wreck and you were bleeding badly, and they rushed you to the hospital. And if that happens, the ER doctor who cares for you, he is not really concerned with your marginal cholesterol level at that moment. What he has to do is stop the bleeding. We call that triage. Right now, today, this day has enough trouble of its own. And it's all you and I can do to triage it. We'll deal with tomorrow when tomorrow gets here. It's all we can do to handle today. We're doing good if we do that. Then, I want you to take that and then apply the Luke piece, this added layer of consider the cost. And Jesus is saying, listen, if you're going to make a major decision, know what the cost is before you do it. And right now, my question for you is, how can any of us possibly know the cost of a major decision? You can't. We hardly know what's happening right now. We sure don't know what's happening in the future. So unless you have to make a critical decision that has lasting consequence, don't do it. We wanted to physically meet as a church today. With everything in me, I did not want to close any physical campus, especially, and all of them are important, but you might not know, today was launch Sunday for our A-Lit campus. Something we've been working on for months, invested all kinds of resources into. We did not want to not have physical church today. So on Thursday when we met, we've been meeting every day for long hours. We made the decision on Thursday, we're still going to have church at every physical location because based on what we knew that day, it was the best decision we could make. We told everybody, tomorrow we're going to get new information, but all we can do is worry about today. So this is the decision that we've made. And then on Friday, things changed. We had more information, including a presidential declaration of a national emergency. We decided the only thing we could do would be to do church online. That was on Friday. And then yesterday, and people asked on Friday, well, what about the next Sunday? We said, we're just trying to take one thing at a time. We don't know. Yesterday, we met some more, and we said it just seems crystal clear that there was no scenario where we were going to be able to have physical church next Sunday either, March the 22nd. So next week, we will be online only then too. And then people asked, well, what about the next Sunday? I don't know. I can hardly see past today. I don't know. I confess to you that irrational long-term decision-making based on crisis is something I struggle with too. It's easy to give into the panic. I made the mistake of looking at my retirement account this week, and I thought, maybe I ought to get out now while there's still something in there. But any investment advisor or any market expert will tell you that the worst time to sell a stock is in the panicked free fall like we're seeing right now. There's no way I can really count the cost. Let me encourage you to fully live into these two texts, these words from Jesus that we just looked at. As you plan, as you make decisions right now, it's a critical moment. And if you'll listen, this is not just about practical financial living. This is a spiritual matter. Your master, the one that we follow, is saying to you, worry about one thing at a time. Just get through today. Let this teaching be a guide to all of us as we navigate what to do and figure out what next step to take. Number 3, we should chase after an uncanny sense of peace. We should chase after an uncanny, unexplainable sense of peace. Let's tell the truth right now. Whatever peace looks like, the opposite of it has surrounded us. It's consumed us. It's infected us. The coronavirus is a real disease, but so is anxiety. And trust me in this, anxiety is just as deadly. It can be deadly physically, but also mentally and emotionally. And no amount of social distancing can prevent this particular infection. This infection is airborne, social media borne, it's relationally born. And this virus grows best with groupthink, and it feeds off of others who also have it. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can decide to chase after peace, and if you do, you can actually have it. I'm not talking about faking it, being all anxious and wound up on the inside and pretending like you're all calm on the outside. I mean, you should go get peace. Peace can be yours. And I want to show you how. There was a guy named Peter. He was an early follower of Jesus, just an ordinary guy. And he's introduced to Jesus, just like some of us have been introduced to Jesus, and he decides, just like some of us decided, that Jesus really is who he says he is, that Jesus is the Son of God, God in the flesh. So this guy, Peter, becomes a follower of Jesus, and one day he's in a boat with a bunch of his friends. Jesus is not there. Jesus is on the shore. And while Peter and his friends are in this boat, a violent storm comes up. I mean, terrifying, violent. These men were incredibly afraid. They thought they were going to die, actually. It was total chaos, total panic. But in the middle of the storm, Jesus decides to take a stroll, a leisurely excursion that just takes him right out into the middle of the lake, right out into the center of the storm where his friends were praying for a miracle. There Jesus is, walking on the water. And they see him, and they want the storm to end, but what Jesus gives them is something even better. So as Jesus gets near the boat, they're not sure who it is, this guy walking on the water, and Jesus says, hey, you don't need to be afraid, it's just me. And so Peter does this. Peter says, Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water. Invite me to walk on the water with you. Come, Jesus said. So Peter got down out of the boat and walked on the water and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and began to sink. So he cried out, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You have little faith, he said. Why did you doubt? And then they climbed into the boat and the wind died down. I want to show you something I have that is one of the most valuable things that I own. This is a painting that my grandfather gave me a long time ago before he died. It was painted by a friend of his, and he had it framed just for me. And I keep it hanging on the wall next to the desk in my study at home. This is a depiction of the story from Matthew 14 that we just read. And you can see the storm all around. See it? See the turmoil and the chaos? But right where Jesus is standing, right where Peter is sinking, is peace. Peter found peace by focusing on Jesus, and he lost it when he stopped focusing on Jesus. The same can be true for you. You can find Jesus. You can find peace by focusing on Jesus, because Jesus is peace. Jesus calms storms, not just out there, but the storms that are in here. So how do you do that? How do we focus on Jesus? How do we find that kind of peace? How do we chase after it and get it? The Apostle Paul tells us, don't be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends human understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. See, when you're feeling anxious about the turmoil in the world around you, what we need to do is stop and pray. What we need to do is stop and thank God for what we do have. What we need to do is make our ask of God, and if we'll go through that process, and if we'll do it over and over and over again, we can let God's peace wash over us. Earlier this week, our teams were working at a pace I've not seen in a long time, maybe ever. And we'd put out one fire and 5 more would come up. We'd answer one question, 10 more would come up. It was madness. It was crazy. It still is, frankly. So by the end of the day on Friday, I didn't recognize it, but I'd really let anxiety get away from me. And I snapped at Susan, and then I snapped at a couple of people on my team, and then I stopped, I stood back, and I thought, what in the world is going on? And I realized that my breathing was shallow, and my heart was racing, and I was really anxious. So you know what I did? I did exactly what Paul teaches us to do here. I stopped, I took a deep breath, and I began to pray. The first thing I did was thank God for life. Because I woke up this morning. I woke up that morning and I woke up today. Life was a gift. Life was a miracle. I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, but today I can be thankful that I'm alive. And then I confessed to God what was going on inside of me, and I said, God, I know you've got the peace that goes beyond human understanding. I know you've got peace that just doesn't make any sense, and I need some of that now. So here's what I've got. God, here's what I'm struggling with. Here's what I'm wrestling with. Just let me have some peace. I stepped out of the storm and I stepped into the presence of Jesus, and I discovered peace. Peace that makes no sense. You can have that kind of peace too. But you have to chase it. You have to go get it. And then like me, maybe this is true for you, you'll find at another moment, you're getting anxious again because all that stuff around you that you can't control. So you'll pause and you'll pray and you'll give thanksgiving and then you'll make your request known to God and then you'll find peace again. And then it'll happen again and you'll go through this process over and over again, but you can have peace. You got to chase it. You got to go get it. One last thing. We should not let fear win. We should not let fear win. Fear is winning now. Not just out there, but it's winning among us. And I feel it too. And fear pulls at me too. So I'm going to tell you, I'm afraid. I'm afraid for our church. I'm afraid for our families. I'm afraid for our future. Admitting that you're afraid is authentic. Fear is a part of the broken human condition. And so I can tell you that I have some fear. But I can also tell you that I refuse to let fear win. I can refuse to let fear control me. I can face down my fear with a faith that is bigger than fear, with a faith that is stronger than any force that can possibly come against it. Paul said to a young pastor named Timothy that God has not given us a spirit of fear. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love, power, and self-control. In John 16:33, Jesus tells his followers now, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. In this world you will have trouble. Does what we're going through count as trouble? You bet it does. But we ought to stand firm. And we can stand firm with our heads held high in absolute confidence that Jesus is all he says he is. And we may have a broken world, but Jesus overcomes it. We may have sickness in our world, but Jesus Christ is the remedy to it. We may have chaos in our world, but Jesus is the peace in the middle of it. We may have selfishness in our world, but Jesus commands us to love our neighbor as ourselves. We may have panic in our world, but Jesus is the solid rock on which we stand. So, friends, my brothers and sisters, fear not. We have a God we can trust. Faith can win over fear. Faith must win over fear. So let's be bearers of that kind of faith today.